Hey everyone, today's video is going to be really interesting. I build Redux with React hooks from scratch, and then I also integrate Redux-Observable functionality into it. So now you can use middleware with this fake Redux that I created. It's going to be a pretty cool video. Check it out.
And our component is going to be called Redux-Observable. It's not really Redux-Observable, but we're going to try to fake it. Okay. And we will load it and we'll just render it. Bam. So a lot of this is logic and not necessarily outputs, but we can use the logic to define our outputs. Yeah, by outputs rendering to the DOM. Okay, that's good. Cool. Style container is not defined. We are not using style container. This needs to delete a bunch of stuff. I don't care about styling right now. None of that. We will use hooks. We're going to use effect. That will be the hook that we use. And we will need state most likely. So we will need use state. I can't. Okay, we have a component. We don't need to wrap in hot. Cool. I love that we're getting warnings. The React is defined, never used, that's fine. Okay, good. So let's take a look here. Is it 8,000, I think, up and on? Yeah. If we type in something here, perfect. That's working. Okay, so what do we want to do now? Let's figure out how to output this idea I have. It's weird because we're not actually making anything. When I came up with this idea, I had a slider and it had multiple values and all the values were dependent on each other. I'm trying to figure out how I would do it without a slider. I'm trying to figure like what's a good way to put this in there. I'm not thinking of one off the top of my head, but I want to know what a good idea would be. Where basically you have multiple values and one depends on another and another depends on another. And we'll just fake it, I guess, for now. Yeah, what's the problem with that? So value 1, set value 1. Okay. I know how to do this. Okay. And then these are all equals use state. And we will start with 0. Do I want that? Why don't we use strings? Why don't we use, I like strings because you can see it. It'll fill up more of the screen. We'll start with nothing and we'll return the final value, which will be another one of these guys. It's kind of weird that it's all up in the corner here. I would like it centered. And I just removed everything to do that. If I Control Z all the way back, this. Okay, and I need that and that. Okay, so let's add these. I don't need global. I don't need CSS. Oh, cool. Okay, styled container. Oh, did that wrong? Okay, so it should be in the middle now. It should be gigantic. We don't have a font size. That doesn't work. 80 pixels? Is that good? You guys think that's readable? Are we not outputting a value? Do I have to put like hello? You know, or loading? Okay, cool. So it's not on the middle, but it's over here, which I guess is fine. Somewhat. Much better. Okay. So when we get our final value, this will change. So here's what we're going to do. The goal of this project is going to be to have value 2 be based on value 1, right? And have value 3 be based on value 2. And then we're going to have final value be based on all of them, be based on all 3 values. So when any of them updates, final value will update. And then what would be neat if final value only actually updates once each of these has a value, which we can do. We can just check the string. So we can do that one first. Use effect. What we're going to do first is we're going to write it like crap, and we're going to fix it after that. That's my goal. So this takes 2 args. So I'm going to change the formatting a bit. Actually, this is going to take all of them. So for each value, I want to check if all the values exist. So I guess I could put them in an array and do every. That might be better. Dot every, and it wants to return if the value, a Boolean, okay? If each one has a value, then I want to make set final value. So if we loop through all of them and we find that, so we would use sum, we use every, and it's not true. So that's why I thought sum and every are opposites, but I'm not remembering here. If everyone is true, then it will be true. If I do sum, it will be true. I want to say if it's not true. See, you're not going to see that not sign, and that really sucks. I don't know how to do this where it's more readable. Basically, we're saying if you don't have this, then we can return and just get out of here. Otherwise, we're going to set final value to like a concatenation of all of them. That could work. And we can join them with spaces. So if that's the case, I can make a array out of it. Values, something like that. And I can just say there. And maybe this, yeah, it's still hard to see it. Two values join like that, space. Okay, so right now no value exists, but if we do ABC, we should have ABC. Perfect, perfect. I want to comma separate them. Okay, so now we have to set these values in the way that we care about for this part. And then we're going to show you how to change it so that it's a lot easier to work with. So the first thing we need to do is set value 1 when the component mounts. So I'm going to actually do value 2. And I'm going to say when value 1 updates, value 2 updates, basically. We just care if it's changed. We don't even care if it has a value at this point. We just care if it's changed. The only one is this one because it'll get updated multiple times. So set value 2, oh, value 1, oops. Set value 2 to value 1, not to value 1. If we have a value 1, yeah, we're gonna have to do like this. Okay, if not value 1, return. Okay, set value 2 to B, we'll do that. And then we have to have another use effect that runs for value 3. And then we'll have another use effect that runs basically as soon as the component mounts, and it sets value 1 to A and doesn't need a check for anything. Okay. And it looks like it's working. So if I change this to D or DC, yeah, I got DC. Okay. So it's working. Now what I want to do is I want to change the way this looks, because what we're doing right now, and this is the problem with a lot of these use effect calls that I've had in more complex components. Each one of these down here, you have to look at it to figure out like what it's listening to and what it cares about. And what we could do is a Redux style or Redux-Observable style, which is what I call that. And there's like a different way we can handle this. And it'll be a lot easier. The way we would do it with Redux style is we would have a dispatch and we would have an action. And we're not going to use reducer, actually. We're going to use set state, use state. We're going to use this. But we're going to have an action, which is always an object with a type. And this is going to be initialized. And then it's going to have a dispatch function like that. This action is incorrect. So this is a little bit different, right? I think of how to make this easier to read. Okay. And instead of listening to value 1, in this case, we're just going to, actually, this will work too. Action.type is not equal to initialized, then we don't do anything here. So we'll return. Otherwise, it'll set value 1. And this one also listens to action. And then if action.type is not equal to set value 2, do we want to do that, or do we want to do something different? Like we can use reducer here, but I don't want to listen to the reducer. Technically we could listen to action and state, and that's just Redux-Observable, but I'm trying to just do it without that. Because what this would have to do is this would dispatch, and this, instead of setting value directly, we're never doing that anymore. You would dispatch, and you dispatch a type like set value 1. And that kind of sucks. That really does. There's no real good way around it, but you would do that. And dispatch would obviously be the set function for the action. And so all we're doing is we're setting what the action does. And then that would cause it to do that. So we would set value 1, payload to A. We're going to say text or value. Value might make more sense, but set value 1 to the value is A. Let's do payload. This is what we could do. And then we could have a use effect that listens to these and then does something on it. So we would have to have one that would do the set values and stuff. And so that's where the use reducer might come in, where we might want to, if we're going to do this, we would want to use reducer. And sadly, the use reducer also gives us a dispatch. And it's not the same as this dispatch. So this is a little crazy. I'm trying to think. We need the value of this. We need this value 1. We need to know what that is. And we need to set it. So we could set it here. But the thing is, we also need to dispatch an action. And we need to then dispatch this one. And this one, instead of having to listen to value 1, it can listen to action again. So if the value is in the action, it'll work fine. But we can also give it action and state. And I'm wondering if I want to create a dispatch function that is the dispatch for both the state and the actions. And then we can make it act like with a middleware for, what do you call it? Redux-Observable. Yeah. So how about this? A reducer gives you state and it gives you a dispatch function. So how about this? Dispatch state update. And then this is dispatch action update, and then we will merge them together and create a new function with use callback. And the initial state of the reducer is going to be that. So we're going to get rid of these. Okay. We're just not there yet. So this is going to be called dispatch, and it's going to be equal to use callback min. Okay. So it uses these two. And what we want to do is we want to call the state update first, and we wait till that's done. And once that's done, oh, we can't use action. We have to use, because action is this thing. This is so we can have middleware essentially for our use effects, for our side effects. What if we want to make it something else? That was a good question. And the reducer takes two things. It takes an initial value, but the first value is the reducer. And reducer, let's write this real quick, takes an accumulator, takes a value, and then the output is the accumulator plus the value for now. That's what we're going to do. Cool. Okay. We'll fix that later. So we do want to do this first, and then we want to do this to call all of our use effects essentially. But the real question is how we want to do this ordering, and also that we can't name it action because action exists here. It is confusing to have one in a deeper scope. So this is like dispatched action, even though technically this is also the dispatched action. I'm trying to be more simple out here. And this one, we could just put dispatched action. That's fine. Action for dispatching. No. Dispatch action update. Actually, technically there's dispatch state action. How about middleware? Producers run middleware. Yeah. Run the reducers, run the middleware. So the thing is, all of this can be done in a hook, and then we can expose action and state from the hook and dispatch. We can essentially create our own Redux for each component, which I've done before. I have an article on this, but I'm curious. I've never built it like this. And also we're returning a value. We don't want to return that value. When you do call dispatch, it should return the dispatched action. So that's how it works right now. I don't technically know how it works with Thunk, but we can do this. Use reducer is not defined. Neither is use RST. Okay. It's loading because we killed this piece off, which sets a chain of events. Okay. And we're not listening to state, and we should. So each one of our use effects can listen to state and action. They could listen to either or. They don't technically have to listen to both because this one only cares about the action, but this one only cares about the state. It could listen to the action. It could say that we've set like the first value and then it does it, or it could listen to the state and check to see if the first value is there. I don't know how we want to do it. We need to have both, but I think we want to listen to the actions here. And then on the final value, that's where we want to listen to the state. So the first things first, I want to save this somewhere because I need to revert back to the one we had before. I got to save that somewhere so we have access to it. We can see the difference between what we're going to write and what we did because we know the code worked before. Okay. Save. ABC, let me make sure. Yes. Okay, this is the old version. So Redux-Observable 1. Okay, and then this one will be Redux-Observable 2, I guess. This is the old way. This is the traditional way, right? Traditional, we could call it that. So we wouldn't call it Redux-Observable. We would call it React hooks. They're all hooks, though. React hooks traditional. How about that? So it's the traditional way you would do hooks. Okay. And then the new one is going to be called Redux-Observable. What in the world? Did we just copy this into another file? Okay. So I want them both to show up, but I really don't care about the other one because we're gonna change it. We're not going to do any of this stuff. We're going to use reducer and use state to mimic middleware and reducers without any Redux. So we're making our own Redux with Redux-Observable style behavior, not Redux-Observable, but that style of behavior, and making it so our use effects only have to listen to action or state. They don't have to listen to every single freaking thing that you could possibly imagine. Like I've had 10 things in here before. Easy. Because you got a bunch of functions, you got a bunch of refs or something else you're listening to, and there's a bunch of things they're looking at. You're looking at like 10 different props to see how to accumulate them together to get new values. That's more confusing. The Redux-Observable style makes it very clear. So instead of saying, set this state, set this state, set this state, set the state, and you don't really know, you can't follow that. You can't follow the component in that case. You can't tell like in what order it's setting all the states. When you do something like this, which we're going to do, we're not going to call this set value 1, but if you're following this, it tells you the action that you care about right at the top. And that's what makes it easy. Redux-Observable does that too. They have that of type. And that makes it very easy to tell exactly what is this use effect doing? What is the goal of it? And the reason for that is these are not named. You don't have a name here of the function. So doing it like this will make it easy once we figure it out. So once it's initialized, then we want to dispatch to set the value, first value. That's exactly what we're going to do. But I don't want to call it set value 1 I just wish there was a better way to call it. And we do have to note where in the state we want to put this. But we could have a reducer that compiles all these together for our final state. But the problem with doing that is if we do have a reducer to combine them, then we would probably have to have something like this that checks all of them and then sets the final value. Man. I wonder if there's a better way to do it. I mean, we could have essentially the same logic, but then we gain nothing. Except for it might be more obvious. Okay, I'm going to try to keep it the same. But normally you wouldn't do that. Normally you'd have a single, okay, let's say we have a single reducer, right? So our reducer is not going to do accumulator value like this. It's going to do accumulator and then value like that. I would probably like this. And I might do this a little differently. So it's not value either. It'll be payload off the value. The accumulator is going to be our object. So what is our object? It is the state. Okay. Yes. This is our state. We've done this before. I've written a reducer. Okay. And then this is I don't want the whole action. I just want the payload off the action. And a payload. That's it. This is the simplest reducer. I've actually written an article. I've done a talk on this kind of reducer and how it could be useful for you if you're using Redux-Observable. So let's get rid of this crap. We're not using it anymore. So now we're going to dispatch a payload which is going to be very clear now what's going on. Value 1, A, right? Before, it wasn't clear. We were doing a set value call and we're passing A into it, but it's not clear like how all this runs together. Now it's clear what's going on. We're dispatching an action, which actually we don't even care what the type is. The action could be anything. We do care about the type, but just it doesn't technically matter. And if that's the case, then technically these could listen to state and not action. Okay. Yeah, like maybe they want to listen to a segment of state. Like this could listen to state.value1, and this can listen to state.value2. It's the same thing we had before. Normally you would have a segment of your reducer where you're doing it where you use combined reducers. We're not using combined reducers, but I do want to, this is a reducer, right? This is what I call the, what is this kind of reducer? Just an object reducer. It reduces everything into an object that you've done. And then we could have our root reducer. And all it does is, no, reducers have to be like this. So I'm going to copy this reducer. And it's going to take a root reducer. Oh, it has to be a reducer that takes another thing, okay, and that gives it reducers as an object, and it says state. It has to run all the reducers, so it has to reduce the reducers. Okay, hang on, we're getting there. We have to reduce the reducers. Oh my goodness. Thankfully, the goal is to write this once and then be able to use it as like a custom hook and use it everywhere. But this is combined. The function we're writing is now it's combined reducers. Reducer. Yeah, but what is it? Oh, yeah, combined reducers. Okay. It's not the combined reducers, though. It's the value of all the reducers or something like that. It's your combined state. So it's your state. That's what we're writing. Takes reducers, and then it takes, it doesn't need the action. I guess it needs the action. And then it reduces each reducer with the action. So you run the reducer. We need an initial state, though. Oh, your initial state is going to be that. For combined reducers? I think that's right. Yeah, I've got this. Okay. So we're going to run the reducer, and the reducer takes an initial value, which is our state, and then it takes the action. Okay. State and the action. Okay, this is the current state, and it takes the action. But technically, it's not going to take the state. It's going to take its part of the state. So it's going to take state.reducer name. So this reducers is not an array. It's an object. Can't believe we're writing a combined reducers for this. We could literally just import the one from Redux. Okay, so object reducers, right? Entries, like that. And then now our reducer is going to be this is not a reducer. This is the reducer name and the reducer. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. I'll make that bigger for you. Okay. So the state will take the reducer name. That's its segment of state. And then we pass it the action. And then we also need to set this to an object with all of the state in it and this. But the thing is, if this hasn't changed from the last state, we really don't want to return it. So instead of auto returning here, I'm going to make it a little bit weird, only because I want to make sure, well, we would have to check to see if they've changed. So the way Redux works is it checks to see if your state objects have changed. If they haven't changed, it won't update the state with a new object. So and that's to make sure that it doesn't keep like doing something new. With combined reducers, I don't know if we care about that though. Because yeah, the combined reducers didn't care about that. It's each reducer individually that cares about it, but the combined reducers itself does not care about that. So then we need to state, and then this needs to be the reducer name, like that. Okay, cool. So there's our combined reducers function. This is like way too big. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. To me, it's a little like too big. Okay. So now we have combined reducers for literally one reducer that we have. So we call use reducer. Let me just space this out of it. We're running out of space here. We just don't have space to work. I could shrink this a little bit. Okay. So use reducer takes a reducer and something else. So we're going to call combined reducers. We're going to pass an object, and we're going to pass it our reducer, which is called now object reducer. So we don't have another name for it. And I don't want to call it object though. Value reducer. Okay. Do we want this? It's so generic. Like I want something that has real values and stuff that we could use in the real world. I guess for this example, we're not going to have that. So I don't have a better idea. Okay. So we have two things right now, and I'm going to break this out too, just because again, we're low on space. Okay. So we've got this use state that gives us a type of initialize for the initial state. That's fine. We have this state here that gives us, it calls combined reducers and gets us our output. Okay. Now these can listen to state for a state update. Every time state updates, they can now check to see if that value is what they expect. So they don't care what part of state updates. They care about state updating. I feel like every time state updates, it'll run this. I only want this to run when that piece of state updates. That's not how Redux-Observable works though. Redux-Observable says anytime the state updates, then you check it and see if your part of state has changed. In this case, we don't care if it changed. We just care if it has a value. So if it has a value, we will update ours. If it does not have a value, we won't do anything. Yeah. That's exactly how we want it to function because that's how it did function in the past. So this payload is correct. This type is incorrect because our reducer is currently not looking for an action type. It's just doing it for every time. It's a very generic reducer. We need it to listen for some action though. Payload, right? That's great, but we need a type too. And we will only do this if the type is correct. Otherwise, we return the original state. So type is equal to update value. There, great. Otherwise, return state. That way it won't have unnecessary updates in at least this part of the thing, but it's not going to change anything. I wonder if combined reducers does really care if the state has updated or not. And if it has, then we do this, or not, we don't do it. It's a good question. I really don't know. I haven't explored it enough. I'm curious how this works in the actual Redux. So maybe it has a little bit more intelligence. Well, either way, our type is value. No, it's update values. So we're calling update values and we're giving a value. And that updates as part of the state. The object, no, what do we call it? It was the values part of the state. Okay. So this listens to state and then updates. We're not looking at state though, but we do care to listen to it. We also care to listen to action because we care about that. Let me see. Am I doing this right? This one doesn't care about state. I see. This one cares about state. It doesn't care about the action. We could say anytime update values happens, check to see if our value has updated. If it has, then go ahead and do this. But what we could do is just listen to state and we can look at state.values.value2. And if that's updated, then we will set .value1. And if that is updated, then we'll dispatch an action that sets value2 to be. So it's a little bit different, but this, I think we're going to have to make this check anyway. When we do update values, we're going to have to check to see if the payload had that value or not. So I think this is fine. If we wanted to do this stateless, we would, because we only care about final values. This actually really only cares about final values. But then we need Redux-Observable for real, because then you can conglomerate all the things and store them in there. There's no like state with a use effect. We'd have to write something to do that. So I think this is the only way to get it to work. Why is it erroring? Dispatch, we need dispatch. Oh, we need dispatch. Technically, we don't need the dispatch because this never updates. This is only created once. So technically, you do not need the dispatch function here. You just need action. We could add the dispatch function, but it will never change. Absolutely will never change. Yeah, it's a conglomeration of these two and never ever changes. Yep. So I'm just not going to add it here. Yeah, you could, but you don't need to. Now I need this code. We'll copy it. We're almost done. This is really quick and easy. This is also going to listen to state. And we're going to update value 3 to see if value 2 has a value. Oh, we're doing this wrong. If not. And I would like to do it like this. Normally I'd wrap this in parentheses, but I'm trying to make it a little bit easier to read here. Throw limited space. Okay. care about value 2 there, if I remember that part. And then the final value now will be simpler. We don't have to check all the values. We just check, yeah, we still have to check all the values. We just have to check state, but we don't have to create this now. So this is now a state.values, and it's object.values, state.values. That gets us values. So lots of values here, value, 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 value. Okay. And then the rest of the code is the same except for this, which we can have a separate reducer for this, but yeah, we could have a separate reducer because it returns a string. We don't have to add it to the same reducer. So instead of values reducer, which is for values, this is the final value reducer, which is going to be a big old copy paste, but we're going to change some things. So if the action that comes in is update final value, then we will return the payload, or it will give us an array. We're going to give the array of values, and we'll just do the join right here. Payload dot join. We don't have to do payload, but I'm just naming it that to be consistent here. Yeah, update final value. Cool. Yes, yes. Because you can have a reducer as part of a segment of state that is just a single value. It could be just a Boolean. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, so this is now going to dispatch this type. So the payload is now the values object right here. If every single one has a value, so we get the values out of it. If everyone has a value, then we dispatch this. And then final value is now state.final value and value 1 of undefined. This values not have anything in it. What we call this. We can solve our first bug for this. I want to know what payload and type are equal to in the DevTools. Payload is value 1a. Yeah. And type is update values. So what does it say? Cannot read property value 1 of undefined. Oh, is it something that's undefined like this? No. Something is looking for undefined. So it's definitely here where the first error. So we just log state. Oh, here's where our thing is. Okay, that's correct. State is equal to a null object. Our combined reducers is not returning something. Something's not right with the combined reducers. I know it's this. It's not our code. Our code's working fine, but this is also technically my code, but I don't know. Retry. Oh, cool. That's cool. It's a little like refresh button. Yeah, I don't know why state doesn't have anything in it. So we call combined reducers after we have done our action, which updates state. It had to have updated state. This definitely ran. The question is the reducer name populated, or am I doing something weird here? Oh, can you please tell me what the thing is here? Reducer name is values. Yes, correct. The reducer is it looks like, I want to see the rest of the string here. This looks like the values reducer though. Yeah, it is the values reducer. Okay, that's all correct. And it's running it. I guess we could look at the output of the values reducer. I know this looks ugly. We're just testing. The output is value 1a. Yes, that's correct as well. And that gets set to a property values here on our state, and our state's dotted. The second one that comes in is final value. That should have looped in too. Final value comes first and then values. We should have seen, final value is undefined. Okay, that's correct. That's correct. Shouldn't have a value. We can make this a little bit smarter. So if there's no final value, you don't display it. I don't really care. It's fine. We could say loading if there's no final value, because then we can attach timers to these, do set timeouts and stuff. I want to do that. Final value or loading. Okay. So we still don't, it's obviously still broken. State is not defined. What in the world? Why is there no state here? We're listening for state. When state updates, we come here. The first time through, it has nothing. We need to give a default value. So notice how I'm right here. I'm providing a default state. Values should have an initial state. So technically we should do something like this. There should be like an initial value. So we do like values reducer dot initial value equals, I'm gonna call it initial state probably, right? It would be nothing. It would just be an object. Again, ding, that's it right there. Okay. And we know that final value will be a string, right? So we will add this to final value here. I'm just gonna do that. Okay. Final value will also be a string, or not also, but it will be a string. And then what we're gonna do down here, okay, is we're gonna copy this, put it here, Now we're going to do dot initial value. I could have probably calculated this, like run through all of these and then call the reducer once with no value into it, with no type. And if you do that, you do get the initial state. So technically you would have gotten it anyway, because these reducers here, your initial state can be defined this way, like that. And so I don't have to define it as a separate variable. I can run the reducer once with nothing in it and it will give me state, which is going to be that now. So technically I don't have to do that. Okay, now I'm going to do that. Before we didn't have that, right? Before we didn't have this, now we will have it. And so it should work when we call our reducer function. So I don't need this now at all. This here will call the reducer, right? The action is initialized. And so it doesn't have any type that they're going to look at. And so it should update them. So they should, on the first run through, have the correct initial state when we call combine reducers. Seriously? No, we got a different error this time. No, I called this. If you call a reducer, you give it the state, its segment of state, which is undefined, right? We're getting into the weird thing. The thing is, I could still use combined reducers from Redux straight up. I don't have to go do my own, but I'm having more fun doing this. It is more challenging, which is what I'm supposed to be doing during these. Okay, so this is undefined the first time through for the final value, and the comes back as that. It comes back as, wait, is it like calling my stuff? We're logging in combined reducers. This is the combined reducers. Let's refresh. Okay, so the first one's undefined. Yeah, that's for the final value. It should be a string here though, which it's probably not showing as a quote. Then the next one, it comes back undefined, and then it gives you this, which was not our first value. This is definitely not our first value. Combined reducers gives us, it should reduce into a function. It should reduce into this is the function. Oh, it does reduce into this function. Oh, and we don't run it. We need to run it with nothing in there. We need to start with it with having absolutely nothing in it. That's the reason it's not working. We have to call it, but if we call it, oh, I see. So root reducer. Okay, I'm seeing this now. I am seeing it. Okay, this is why you do this in Redux. To get the initial state, they normally have you pass it in. I can just do that. Problem solved. Yeah, we got something. Can I like log state at any point in time here so I can figure out what the heck is going on? It's erroring, I think, in like server side. It feels, if we look at our console, yeah, we're getting a server side error now. Missing dependency. I know that. I did that on purpose. Can we just get rid of these errors? ESLint, disable, line, react hooks. What was it called? Something depths, exhaustive depths, exhausted depths. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Next line. Okay, cool. I technically don't want to disable that, but it makes sense for this example. In the future, I don't know how you would do it. Maybe you disable it at the top of the file or something. How do you fix for this? How do you tell it this never changes? Please don't make me pass it in. It absolutely will never change. I can guarantee it, certainty. Okay, so the error was cannot destructure property payload of undefined or null. We still need to pass in an object. Okay, so we can't do that. We got to do this, and then we're done. Yeah, it worked. Okay, cool. We're not going to pass this in, which we can technically in here, but we want to run it the first time with nothing. So this is our initial state, and we could just generate it now when the component runs. But technically we're generating it every single time because we are calling this function. I don't want to do that. Let's do that up here. Yeah, that's much better. So then we store it before this even runs. And then now it's much better. Okay. Does our code work? That still backend errors. Okay. Cannot destructure payload. Wait, hang on. Structure payload of undefined or null. Oh, because it's undefined. This is always undefined coming in here. The action is not undefined, but the state. No, I did this wrong. When you call root reducer, you got to give it the state, which is undefined. State is undefined, but the action is that. Okay, I've done this before. I don't know why I can't remember. Okay. Lots of logs, lots of infinite looping. Values never gets a value. When state updates, it reloads. That's the problem. These are listening to state updates, and then they are themselves updating state. Oh no. Oh, that's horrible. Make it stop. No, just don't. No. Kind of like tell it to stop. My experiment failed. There's no way. This can't break. once you update state enough times, oh, I know what it is. Okay, remember how I said combined reducers doesn't care about the state? It does. It really does care about the state. Oh, this is terrible. Why did I write it like this? Okay, so we have to say const next state equals. So we have to run through all the reducers. We have to see what gets generated. And then we have to loop through all of the first levels of these. Not the entries, but the values, and see if they're the same as the state values. So we need the values from state and the state from the... Okay, yeah. Object dot entries. Man, we actually care if the next state is different than the state. Not necessarily the other way around. Do we need both? No, because they'll be the exact same. Because we did this reducer name thing. What if one of these is undefined, though? Will it still be in here when you do object entries? What about this? T equals A undefined. So if we log T, it does have A as undefined, which means it thinks it's there. Object.entries T. We have 2 values. Yeah, that's good. Okay, we actually technically only have 1, though. Why does it think we have 2? Weird. Oh, it's an array of 2 values. Okay, it does work if you have undefined. This is going to work. This is going to work. Okay, cool. So object entry state, and then we will map. No, we need a sum. And if the reducer value state segment, this is a segment of state. That's what I call these. I don't know what they're actually called. And this is wrong too. We're deconstructing. So we have a state segment name. So it's actually the reducer name, I think, which is here. So this is the state segment name. Okay. And the state segment. So if this state segment is, I'm going to use object.is instead of equal, which is just a little bit easier to do it. For me, I like it. And I think it does a better job in general with NaN and all that other stuff. And we definitely want that here. We definitely want object is. We don't want an ambiguous like equal that doesn't do what you expect. And so it's next state and the state segment name. Okay. And that will achieve what we want. And then if this is true, then we need to do something. This is a ternary, guys. It is a very large ternary. I don't know if I want to make it a something, but it probably should make it a value and then do the ternary. We're already in, there's no way to shorten this up. So I really probably should just make it a value as changes. Yes. I wonder if sometimes this could get messed up though. What if your state like changes every single time? We're not looking at a state segment. We're looking at the whole state, which is because in Redux-Observable, you can look at a state segment. You still listen for every state update, but based on the state update, you can tell it to stop processing at a certain point when like a segment is different. Because what I'm wondering is like every time the reducer gets called, it will update the date. That wouldn't make sense because you'd have to do it infinitely. Yeah, because that's the problem with listening to state versus listening to an action, which was my original effort. So if it has changes, then you return next state. Otherwise, you return state, which is exactly what we do everywhere else. And in fact, like this could be a function in itself that's saved. What's wrong? Cannot read property value on of undefined. This looks really familiar. Like I just saw this error. What if there is no change between them? Okay, so the first time you run this, there won't be anything here. This could be undefined. Then does this exist here? It should. We're checking to see if any of them have changed. If one of them has changed, yeah, I don't get it. Unless it tells me where it's, yeah, I know where it's failing. I just don't know why. At what point does it fail? This is where I'd love to use web replay because I could see in the past when this error would have occurred and what all of the values were at that time frame. Let's look at our initial state. I'm curious what initial state is. Okay, initial state is nothing, but it should have something. It should have multiple things, in fact. That's why it's broken. We're calling this now, and our initial state is running through this check, and it's seeing if anything changed. And it should have changed, because originally, state didn't have anything in it, because we didn't pass anything in it. Our initial state was nothing. Okay, this should work. Please don't die on me. Okay. Come on. Why are you taking so long to reload? Seriously? There's absolutely no reason for this to take this long. Did we create another infinite loop that is doing server side now? There's no way. We fixed the infinite loop. This fixes it. This gets called, otherwise return state. This does not update again unless value 1 exists and it keeps updating value 1. The problem here is because we're not listening to a segment of state. Okay, fine. I'll do something a little bit different. So it does matter here which segment of state you're listening to, which is the same as map state to props. You just can't listen to state. You have to listen to something on state. which is fine, I guess. Like, we wrote all this extra code here for no reason. Would have been nice. It actually broke things too. I would have rather had the state the way it was. And I guess this is fine. It's another like separate check, but I don't have to do it. Okay, so this should work now. Is it broken? You're like waiting on something? I want to make sure this is actually loading. We should get a bunch of console logs. Even this one should have logged, because it should run our stuff. I feel like something broke and I don't know what it is now. I don't feel like that. I know something broke. I just wish I knew what it was. When you go to our web server at localhost 8000, it should execute. Yeah, we got here. Okay, we are in an infinite loop. I just don't know where. And I don't know what caused it, because it was clearly working before we did this. This is listening to state.values. So it does run once. It checks if this happens, and then it dispatches if it does. Wow, this is incredibly difficult to write. Once it works, it should be fine, but it is very difficult to write. I want to know what's being called and what's not being called. I don't know how many times we reload the component. That would be good to know too. So if we run something here, like, it would tell us every time the component runs, and it can output the state, the action that called it, and the state, so at least we'll get some extra debugging info. Okay, the action was initialized. Yes, and the final value is that, and the values are this. Okay, let's go through this step by step. I wish we could do this in the client, but we did refresh, and it causes a server-side render. If I wasn't doing server-side rendering, then we would be able to debug this, which is really dumb. Now I wonder why I do server-side rendering on development mode. Like, why would you want this? It's good to check it before you go to prod, but it really sucks because I can't debug. Okay. Action type initialized. High 3 never got called here, which means we never dispatched. So initialize occurred, but this never got fired off either. So we called dispatch, right? No, we never called anything. Something got stuck. I don't know what it is, but something got stuck. Let's look through this again. So we're logging these two at this point. State is correct. So we have the correct initial value. We have our root reducer. And we have the initial state, which is also correct, which I probably don't want to create every time. Our initial action. We can put something out here. I mean, it doesn't matter, but it's telling us that action keeps updating because no, it doesn't now, but we can just do this so that we're not recreating this every time. Okay. So action is that, state is that, and then we come down here and we hit high 2. We come down here and we should get all the way down to this render step here. It should occur. Use effect does not run server side. So we should show loading. Oh, seriously? Can we do 8000? Okay, loading. Yes. Yes, it is now giving us data back. That's fantastic. And we are getting an infinite loop. Very much getting an infinite loop. This use effect was just not designed for this. I want to know if values has been updated. Why does this not work? Values is never... The only time values gets updated is when it dispatches, which is every time. Yeah, I think it was smarter to do state. Interesting. I wonder if some of my Redux-Observable code has suffered from this. Because I would check part of the state, c.value, .value 1 or some crud like that. State's not updating every time, but it potentially is. So basically what is going on is this. It's seeing that state.values.value1 exists. So if it does, we go down here and dispatch. We don't look at the previous state of it. What I would have done in the past is, with Redux-Observable, I would have checked to see if value 1 has changed. And if it has changed, then I would call this. We also don't want to check an action for update values, because if the update values gets called, now we have to also check the state, and it's not going to update at the same time. I don't think this is possible. Not with use effect. I have to think. Okay, just to reiterate, I'm trying to find a way to put pass action or action and state in here, and just that. And so if you have bunches of things that you're listening to, you don't have to listen to all of them. You just have the one thing. And we're getting into an infinite loop state because of some of the choices I've made on how we're going to do this. It would work fine with action, would work perfectly. Because if an action type, then dispatch. But if not, then don't dispatch. So you have to actually call this to create an action that would end up being dispatched for it to want to reload continually. And what's happening right now is that we're not being smart about it. We are saying that if state gets updated, then go ahead and force this. And we have to listen to a segment of state to be able to deny this. I don't know a way to make this work. Maybe there's a way with refs, because it's going to end up looking like our other example. It's going to end up being identical to the traditional Redux hooks example, where you have to do this. I don't want to have to do this. I want to find a way to do this without this problem. And the only way to do it would be like state.values.value1, state.values.value2. And the thing is, state.values.value1 doesn't always exist, which is fine, I guess. But I don't want identical code. Who wants to? The point was this, that you can have middleware that does this and has side effects. And every side effect is a dispatch function, and it won't be something different. It'll be really clear what's going on. But here we got a side effect that listens to state. I want to listen to update values, but I want to listen to update values that like tells me what kind of value we're updating. Technically, you don't have an object that you're updating like separate properties every time. That's not how this works. Normally in Redux, you don't have one thing. It would be like update value 1. It wouldn't be called value 1. It'd be called like update block list or something. Update this segment of data. And so then when that goes into the state or calls another action, you would know exactly what it is. Yeah. Way I've tried to do it here though, I can't listen to action here. It doesn't make sense, because if you listen for that, it's clearly going to be there. You'd have to listen for this and check if value 1 was set. So we can do it. We can do it. It's just not ideal. And then the thing is, our bottom piece here, where we're updating the final value, still has to listen to state. And state will be updating. After this gets called, state gets updated. And then what happens is it checks the values again, see if the values exist. If they do exist, this will update again. Because no use effect actually has any state in it. It doesn't actually know if it's updated or not. It doesn't actually know if like the state's changed. The state on each use effect is this call here. And that's the problem we're running into, is that the state of each use effect is this. It's like your distinct until changed. It's this function, or an operator in reactjs. So you'd listen on state pipe, and you'd map to your selector. Select state. It's a map state to props, and you could do a little bit more logic with it, but that's essentially what you do. And then you would distinct until changed, like that. But I don't think I can replicate that here with this, without knowing what I'm selecting out to do the distinct until changed. That's the problem. I thought I could do it. We still could do it if we listen to action, but we still need to get a state update at some point. And we need that state update to, even if it does listen to state, it'll work the way we have it. So technically we don't need to store the other values. We're not using them. We're only using them to calculate this. But I think it's just awkward. Like you just keep firing an action that like adds the payload and adds the like action.payload like this. That's not what I want necessarily. And that's not the same behavior we had before. Okay. Oh, and now we're looking at this again. It's not going to work. Value 1 never changes. What the heck? State.value is a value 1. That should be undefined for a while, and it's set to something. If it is set to something, then dispatch. And then it dispatches continually. It's still a problem. No, but this should only fire if value 1 changes. This shouldn't emit every time. This is potentially the issue here. If values get updated, this looks and checks if we have them all, and then does it. Values won't update though. This doesn't update values, it updates final value. This should work. Okay, we could log something at least to figure out what's going on. And I would like to log these two because they give me the most information. Oh, man, a failed challenge. So far I haven't failed any. This is awful. Come on, you mean let's see. Update final value. Okay, we're here. And the payload is an array of values. And we should be joining those values. Final value is quote, quote. Yeah, but what is values? Values should have stuff in it. Values should have stuff in it. And we are repeating because we're checking to see if every value is a value. If so, then it returns false. Did I get every wrong? I don't think so. Seriously, what happened there? Is this state.values? No, I created it here. These are just strings. Is this going to refresh? I don't think so. I think once you hit refresh, then this is going to get into an infinite loop. I don't know. That's a good question. Man, sometimes I challenge myself a little too hard. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to kill off this tab that's running because it's broken. This is never ending. Pack builder. Where's the tab? Oh, here it is. Yep. Okay. I want to reload it. I want to see if we fixed it, which we did. We did fix it. It's still a failed challenge, but at least we can complete it. So this isn't updated yet. And what's interesting is the state, it's not correct. If update values, make it the previous state and the previous, what was the state at this point? This was adding value 2, and it was there. And then what is state should be? State should be the state for this segment, which is what we're doing. I guess we could log state, and then payload. That'll give us some information about what's happening. This one errored. Okay, log is not defined. Maybe if it did console log, then I wouldn't have an undefined log. Okay, here we go. So we're here. I don't care about this point anymore. Maybe we should have done that, and I could have stepped through it. Okay, so the payload was undefined the first time. That's the second time the payload should have this, yes. And the third time, why is state always an object? Why would state always be an object? Because if we return next state, is this like a user reducer issue? Because let me think through this. Okay, next state returns back. Like we could log next state here, and will give us a lot more information. Okay, I want to know the first one. The first next state is that. Just final value. No values, which is, that's correct. That's correct. The second time through, it should have values. Yes. Okay, that's correct. And then here, where you're looping again, okay? Yeah, value says value 1. That's exactly what should be there. It's in state 2. It's here. It's here. That's good. Okay, so next state now. Okay, that's not the one we care about. So now this gets fired. Payload is value 2. Yeah, and state is nothing. State is not correct. This should have the values in it. Just let's see something real quick here. Let's make sure. This is the next state. And then the next state is like this. Yeah, now it has just value 2 because state was undefined. We're logging state and payload here. If state is undefined, it is an object. What if it is undefined? How would we even get it to be undefined? When we're looping through this, this is our state. Can you believe it? Also, I should probably rename this because this is our state in action, but this is the like local state. This is the combined reducer state. So if anything has a change, then it returns something new. Otherwise, it's always the combined reducer state. Combined reducers state, maybe? Or combined state? That could work. Combined state. And this is next state, next combined state. It's weird because I've written this functionality before. This is not the first time. And it broke. Cannot read final value of undefined. Hey, we're getting somewhere. Okay, what is it? We're supposed to be logging state when we get in here, like right here. We are not logging those. Okay. So it's saying can't read final value of undefined. This would be where we're reading final value, and then state would be undefined, which means the code we just wrote has some bug in it. So if we do this and we do state, we should get an object with state undefined anytime we go to it. It's not logging anything. It's really strange. Final value. No. Final value of undefined. That's in here. Right here. This is undefined. Dang. Man. Hey. Okay, we still have a problem though. Let's check our last state. Make sure. So we're updating values. And we have 3 values now. Yeah, so let's get rid of these logs. That one I still care about though. This one I do not care about. Okay, so what's happening is, at this point in time, we reload our component twice, it looks like. Update values fires, and then the state gets updated with all the values. Yes. And then this action fires again, or it hasn't changed since the last time. So even though we have all our values and the component loaded, this the final value piece here did not update. Oh, because I changed this code thinking I was correct, and I was not correct. I was right the first time. Hey, oh my goodness. We did it. It's terrible. It's almost worse than we had before. I mean, it could be better. Let's say this is an object with a bunch of stuff in it. It technically could be better. We're using reducers. We're doing Redux-Observable style, but we have to do this anyway. And we're not using observable, so we're like losing out on that. The only way this would be beneficial to you is if every value update was something where you accumulated in an action and you didn't actually need the value anywhere. So if you don't need to add something to state, then the action part makes more sense because you can just keep firing actions. And then at some point, then you can do a set state and then you can have your output. So you can have your set state and your output down here. Right now, this is terrible. This is like the worst. So the traditional way is like 85 lines and this one's 236. But it's not just like that. There's a lot more code we've run because we've added a reducer. We've added another reducer. We've written our own combined reducers, which usually comes with Redux. we've got our root reducer, which normally, yeah, you would have to generate it here, and then the initial action, which this one could be like something you pull in, because this could be a constant object. There's no reason for this to be any different here. So the real question is why we would want to do it this way. And I was thinking that it would allow you to have less things down here. It does if you just do the action piece. So you can get your little middleware functions. It does not if you have to get these values. And this is a fault of useEffect. And I'm really wondering if there's a way to do it better. Because I've done useEffects where you can like automatically send stuff through. Okay, so let's see, I dispatched this. Without an observable, this would be harder. But what if we wanted to use observables? We'd still need to listen to stuff like this, and we'd still need selector functions. It's a lot more boilerplate. There's a lot of extra stuff you have to do, but it really makes your components easier to follow. Significantly. If you could make it easier by generating some of this stuff on the fly, then it wouldn't be so bad. So what if we did want to use Redux-Observable or an observable, RxJS, right? So our useEffect this would be a new hook. It would be like useObservable, and it would take a function, and it would probably take dependencies too. Would it though? Yeah, I think so. It would be function and dependencies, okay? It wouldn't be that, obviously. I did this wrong. So this would be like that. And down here, we could listen to dependencies. That's how you'd normally do it, but we're not going to do it this way. I'm going to try to cheat this. So I want to make an observable here where all the stuff in the observable has to do with refs. The only time you can't use refs is if you need it in here where you start, because then you had to make a subject. But I could fire off the subject. Oh my God, could I do this? Could I make like could I do something like this? And then like fire that off. So it'd be action.next instead of dispatch, but dispatch is just action.next. That's what useState does this behind the scenes. It's not with RxJS, but it's the same concept. But then if I can listen to this, just like I'm listening to it right now, but I don't want them to update unless action has updated. Yeah, action won't update. It's a one-time thing. So now we subscribe. We never update them, but we need to have some way of telling them like, hey, these values updated because your observable is running with callbacks that are closed around old values. So to close around new values, so if I closed around new values, let's see, I would use refs for everything. So we would create a ref of all the dependencies and how to make it easy to get to them. Because I don't want to do like, and then every time, basically like that, I wouldn't even do this then. I would just do this. This would be so stupid. Every time it gets called, you're constantly setting this, which is fine. But then now anytime I want to access dependency, I got to do, dot the dependency, dot value one, like this. This is gross. And the goal was so that you don't have to pass your dependencies in. That was what the goal that we had. A goal for if you had a use observable, you would still have to pass them in. But behind the scenes, it's like, it's creating refs on the fly for all your dependencies, like this, something like this. And so you always have access to the latest dependency, but then your dependencies be an object, not an array. So basically, we would never want this useEffect to update. We'd want to set this observable once and listen to it forever. And then if any of these update, you would run through your pipeline. But the only benefit here that you would get is that now you can listen to action. And our custom hook would do something like this. And then it would give us this action thing. So we would have a use memo on the action instead of a useEffect. This would be a use memo. And it would be like action equals new subject, something like this. But this is not going to work either, because if you use observable, you should take an observable. So not a function necessarily, but the observable itself, which doesn't work because that has to close around and get these dependencies. So it's an epic. It'd be an epic here. It would use Redux-Observable. So if you get the epic in, it would pass that to a useEffect. Somewhere else in your code, you'd be doing this with a use memo, but in this case, we would not. And so our useEffect would subscribe to the epic, and then when the epic returns, we have to subscribe to the epic. Okay. Yeah. And then when this returns, you get you have to call unsubscribe. So you have to do .unsubscribe, and then it'll call that when it unmounts. And then this epic itself would need these dependencies. So it'd have to be like in here, because the epic wouldn't, we'd have to call the epic. So you'd call it, okay, we're getting somewhere. You'd call it, and as the third arg, So the first arg of an epic is the action, the second arg is the state, and the third arg is your dependencies. So it'd be like dependencies.current, but we can't do that. We'd have to do the ref so that we can call .current in our epic and always get the current value, because we'll be setting it here every time the component reloads. So you'll always have the latest, even if you're not listening specifically for changes, you'll always have the latest. Yeah, that's crazy to think about. But this would be a way to use observable where it doesn't. So one problem with observables, this is different from this idea was to like fix this, and I didn't fix it. To fix the dependencies. This idea is to make it so that your observables don't unsubscribe and resubscribe constantly based on the changing refs. Because if you unsubscribe and resubscribe to observables, there's a cost there. Whereas if you can subscribe once to an observable, which is how you're technically supposed to do it, and then you pipe off of the observable, then you don't have to deal with unsubscribing and trying to manage that and trying to make sure that it's turning off and killing all the listeners and everything. Technically, unsubscribe does that for you. It kills off all this. But I'm saying you don't have to do that in every single component that you want to use an observable. Technically, you just give it an observable. But if the observable at any point in time has to update because of the values in it, because of these dependencies, it would be nice to be at the point where you don't have to unsubscribe and resubscribe, but that the values are coming in. So I wonder if there's another way to do it, where if you do the use Redux observable or something like this, each observable has a dispatch function. Can I do that? I can do that. I can do use Redux observable, and then this is epics, and you just pass in all your epics, and then they manage everything for you. And Redux is like running, the fake Redux that we created is like running in the background, and it's all in here now, and then it doesn't have anything to do with hooks. Yeah, you can do that, but then like, where are your hooks stuff? Would it be more beneficial to do this than using hooks? You can compose operators, but now you're writing epics. And if you want to store state, you have to do it Redux style. There's the foundation on Redux Observable is not like that. You can use an observable. It doesn't have to be Redux Observable. You're still going to have the dependency problem. You're still going to have to do like distinct until change, like in your pipeline. You're going to have to map to a selector, so you can pull stuff out, and then you have to distinct until changed, like that. So you're still going to have to do that when stuff comes in to make sure that it doesn't keep going through your pipeline if nothing has changed. And then at the end, you're going to have to map to an action, some action, and pass the data into your action. So you'd have to do something special to it. So whatever data that you get, your like payload, and like over here it'd be of type, update values or something like this. You'd have a payload, and you would return something, right? So type update final value, and your payload would be like, I have no clue what this would be, but in this case, it'd be payload.join like this. Because somehow when you call this, you'd have to tell it to put that stuff in there. Or you could do something different. I wonder how you would do this with Redux Observable. It's interesting. Probably people have solved it already. I can look at their ideas for how they've done it. But if you have anything in here where it's dependent on outside state or like a context or something like that, hooks works really well for that, but it just keeps reloading and recreating functions. When you have observables, the cost of that is a lot higher because you have more going on behind the scenes. And observables are technically supposed to stay running, and you're supposed to pass new values into them, and that's how they're going to get updated. Yeah, the state of an observable is in the observable. It's not supposed to be like listening to other things outside. And the only way to make that work is to unsubscribe and resubscribe to it, which causes obvious issues where you're constantly recreating observables and you get a performance penalty for that. Yeah, this is a good question. This would be an interesting challenge to do for another time, to do something like this. You're essentially creating a Redux Observable, a little tiny one. They have use reducer, and Redux Observable benefits from being just pure middleware. So if you wanted a middleware that used RxJS, you could do something like this, as long as it didn't have any dependencies or didn't have to set any state. If you need a set state, you can pass those as dependencies here, set state functions. You could do that. I would prefer to not look at any values, but again, even if we had to look at values, we could still do that. We could still do that in here. And in fact, so we're passing a ref to an object in here. What if your current itself was an object? No, then it would be, yeah. We could somehow mask out the fact that, no, this epic gets called once. Each epic, so this is epics, but technically it's epic in this case that we're calling with this. We would actually have to run a loop for each epic and then combine them together with merge. So it'd be like this. Okay, let me think. Epics dot map. And then you would pass each epic this stuff. Something like this. You call each one, you give it these things and the dependencies ref, and then it would have access. And then you'd pipe off of that, and you could do all. It wouldn't be like this, but you'd pipe off of it and then subscribe to all of them. You don't have to pipe, I guess. This is what you'd do. So you've got something that's managing the state or the side effects essentially behind the scenes with your hooks. And you could technically just do everything in here. You don't need the hooks now if you're doing that. So where's like the benefit in the hooks there? So hooks are highly beneficial and they're part of the language and people know how to use them. And that's really what you want to use. But I find them very difficult to reason about. It starts getting really complex very quickly. And having everything that the use effect is listening to down here, I'd actually prefer that to be the first arg. Use effect the first thing you should do is tell you what it's listening to. Then the second thing you should do is say, here's the callback that gets called when the stuff we're listening to gets updated. That makes a lot more sense to me because that's the most important stuff. I usually care what I'm listening to first to know what I'm executing it on. Not there's execution here, but I really don't know what it's doing. I have to scroll all the way down, find the second arg and see what's passed into it and see what potentially is changing that it's listening. And it's not really clear. They call it use effect, and then you just pass an array of values. But this exhaustive hooks thing, I've run into problems with this a lot, where it's trying to put in things that I don't want because I need certain capabilities or functionality that, like I need an initial state, like when the component loads, I want that state. I don't want it to ever change again. So even though I might be looking at it or something like that, even though I might be looking at something that came in from outside that maybe was a prop, I need to know what that prop was when the component loaded, maybe not at any time it was updated, which this it's not aware of. So I've done this a lot, disable the reactive exhaustive hooks. So yeah, there's some interesting things here. I definitely don't like the solution. So far, every solution I've made has been, I think, better than the original. This one I do not like better. This is horrible. It's definitely a middleware style. Instead of setting values, you're dispatching. But it's still not clear what's happening. It's still not like obvious what's going on here. Whereas the hooks method here, it's very clear. Oh, I'm listening to value 1, blah, blah. Normally, this is not so easy though. Normally, you're listening to 3 values or more. You have tons of stuff in here, different setter functions. And then when you're listening, you have no clue what this does. Like I would have no clue. I would maybe see this somewhere mixed in there somewhere, but it would not be very clear. So I want to fix this. And it would mean not using hooks. And I would like to use reactjs and stuff like that too. And the reason is I do a lot of asynchronous. I do a lot of things with observables normally. And as I've shown you already in previous days, that the RxJS version of handling concurrency, cancellation, errors, all of that is much easier to do than like a class way or even this function way here that we're using in React, the functional way. It's easier to do it with RxJS. It's built on top of all that. It has that technology all from the get-go. So the real question is like, what is a good way to use that kind of behavior, both Redux or React hooks? And I have not found it. I've not found a way to clean up hooks, to make them clean, to make them easy to figure out, to make them like obvious for somebody who's coming in there the first time to figure out what this component is really doing. So far, the only reason I know is because all of my components are new and I know who's written them. I know what they've written. I would not want to go to a hooks component where there's like tons and tons of hooks, 100 lines of hooks, and I have no clue what's going on. And I have to follow it around and try to figure out how it's actually working. So that's an issue I want to solve, and I don't have a solution. Clearly, what I came up with here does work. You can, this is my old one. You can do this, and it does function, but it is not the solution I want. It's great if everything's async, and most of the stuff is asynchronous, but it's not technically asynchronous. It's still like, you just see this. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to convince anybody that this is a better way. I can't convince myself. I don't like it. I like this way better for that particular behavior. I just don't like how crappy it is to use it. So if anybody else has any other thoughts on how they can make this better and how you can come up with a better way of doing this, I will implement it next time. I will definitely do that. Otherwise, if you have any other challenges, you can tweet me them and I will bring them up next time I stream. I thank you very much and goodbye.
Hope you enjoyed that video on building Redux with React hooks and Redux-Observable. If you liked what you saw and you'd like to give me some feedback, I'd really much appreciate it. If you want to subscribe or like, then you'll see more videos like this. Like and subscribe. It's so good. Yeah. Okay, great. Bye.